Hey everybody, welcome back. We're just going to take a brief side note here and talk about solving bugs when you're building a server. As you've seen so far, whenever we're reading errors, it's a little different than seeing it in our regular web browser console. So it's worth looking at a little closely here. And then we're going to look at a tool that helps us even more with some nice console logs whenever we make requests. So again, the focus of this is console errors in Express, and then we're going to use a logger. We'll come back to this in just a moment. All right, so this is the server that we've built previously with the movies and TV shows. And I've caused a problem somewhere that we're going to do a GET request and then figure it out. So if I go over to Postman here and I do a GET request to movies, I'll hit send. And instead of getting my movies back, I get this reference error, this kind of like standard HTML template. Now, whenever you get an error like this, or maybe it's even non-existent, you don't even get a response in here, it's just pending. Oftentimes, if you come back to your server and look in your server's console where it's been running, that is where the error will output. So we're just going to talk about reading this. You'll typically look right where the error occurred, the first line. It will tell you what type of error and the issue at hand. It may not always be this specific, sometimes a bit more cryptic, but you'll get better at reading them. Once you see the error type, my advice would be to then scan down this right side and see these files that are being listed. This is the stack trace of where everything broke. If it's not the first line, you should eventually see a file that you wrote, and that's going to give you a lot of information on where to go look first. Now, fortunately, we're something like a reference error. It's very exact. It's saying go to the movie router, line 14, section 12. So we'll go to the movie router. We'll come down to line 14, and it says movie is not defined. And sure enough, it's movies. So I can go ahead and fix this. And so whenever you have an error in Express, whenever you have an error that's on your server side, this is the console you're coming to figure out what. And you'll usually see something like this, so you'll want to scroll up a little bit, see the name of the error, and then try to figure out which file did it occur in. Great. So that's a little bit on error handling in the console, but it would be nice to be let know more of what's happening. So there is a common module you can use. It's something called a logger that will console log the type of requests that are coming in to your server. So the one that we are going to use is one called Morgan, and we're going to use it in its dev configuration or for just development purposes. So I'm going to stop my server here. I'm in the folder that my server is in, and I'm going to npm install Morgan. Just like Express, this is a per project installation. Don't install it globally. All right, I can start this back up. Nodamon server.js. And now we get to implement Morgan. So on our server file, up here at the top, we will import Morgan by requiring Morgan from our node modules. And then this is a middleware that we would like to fire on every request. Just like Express.json is looking for a request body, we'd like Morgan to console log every time something happens to our server. So we're going to tell our server to .use Morgan in its dev environment. And that's all we got to do. So this logs requests to the console. Let's take a look at what this looks like. So we'll come back here and we'll do now our get request to movies. It came in just fine. And if we come back, notice in our console, we have this nice console log. It says just received a get request to /movies, and the status is 200. Now you may have read a little bit about status codes. We haven't gone into depth on them yet. We'll be introducing them soon. It's just another way to send information back to a client of what is the status of what they requested. And there's a couple status codes we'll need to learn. But this right here is going to be very helpful when you're testing your server. If I were to do a get or a get1, first, especially if I grab the ID here of a movie and I do a get1 request to that and send, it shows you a little bit more on the console, right? It shows you the endpoint, but instead of showing the parameter placeholder, it shows you the actual ID information that was passed through. Also very helpful. Once we get connected to a front end in the further episodes here, this is going to be very nice. We can see is the logic on our front end handling the IDs in a way that the back end is receiving it like this. Last point I'm going to make about this, whenever you're building a server, don't even think about the front end yet as far as building it. Make sure every endpoint that you're building works in Postman. So if I'm able to come into here and do all my get, post, put, delete requests to Movie Router inside of Postman, I can rest assured that when I'm building my front end, if something breaks, it's something I've done on the front end. My back end has been tried and tested in Postman. Provided it's given the right information to the right endpoints, it's going to work. So that gives you kind of an assurity when you're on the front end that there's something wrong up there instead of what you built previously. Now, I'm not saying that's foolproof. Things will still happen, but it's a good method to test all endpoints in Postman before continuing on and building the features on the front end that are going to interact with them. All right, so from going on forward now, always be using Morgan to get these nice console logs. Once you've got that installed and working, let's move forward.